welcome to Commander Central episode 257, and today we'll be taking a look at the new legendary creatures from Commander 2021. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
How you guys doing today?
Peachy.
Pretty good.
It's finally feeling like summer again out there, so I'm in a better mood. I got to walk outside in the sunshine. That's always makes my day feel better.
Yep, well, I hope that it's wonderful for you, because I'm going to burst your bubble right now and tell you I looked at the weather and it's supposed to be crap again next week.
Is it? I think I saw that. I will just try to have to enjoy today while I can.
Way to be a party pooper, Chris.
Well, I looked at it because I was all excited. I'm like, oh yeah, sunshine, woohoo. And I looked at it and I'm like, So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to drag someone down with me.
Well, I will resist it for now. But yeah, I mean, it's April, whatever. It is what it is. It'll be nice soon enough. So
yeah, I'm at least patient. We didn't get, snow like, 2 days ago or whatever.
Yeah, right. Wisconsin for you. So anything else worth talking about anyone's life here? Anyone play any fun games or anything?
Not really. I did play one game where, what was I playing against? An Atraxa deck, I think it was, or something. Okay. I don't know what it was, but everyone else was going ham, and I was getting tired and bored of the game. I had no way of winning, really. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm sitting on a Demonic Tutor and Nahiri that can ult to search up a creature out of your deck. And I just tutored up my combo creatures and comboed out of the game and left. I was done. I was like, whatever.
I want them. And then they could finish out if they wanted to.
Yeah. Just like, yeah. I'm done. I'm tired. I got to get out of here.
I love it.
Sometimes those games, if it gets late and the games go long, you just want to finish up. I've been there. How about you, Max? Anything for you? Played it all lately?
I have not played Magic in a handful of weeks now, so I have nothing to report.
All right. Well, I would bet our listeners have played quite a few games, so if there's anything interesting out there in listener land you want to tell us about, how would you go about doing that, Chris?
Well, you can reach us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers, such as the Decks You Play series, our guesting on the show, or just joining our community and chatting with us and playing some virtual EDH. This week we want to say hello and welcome to 3 new patrons, Christopher Maloney, Bobby Eanes, and Nathan.
Thank you all very much for supporting the show, and thanks to all our listeners just in general for supporting us in whatever form that takes, whether it's as a patron supporter or just by listening and clicking that upvote button or telling your friends about us. That all makes a big difference, and we really do appreciate it.
Yes, we do. And so the Chris Maloney, I do believe that this is a local gentleman.
Oh, neat.
If I'm wrong, hit me up, on Slack or Twitter or whatever and correct me or whatnot. But same gentleman with this name actually his wife made a flag out of Magic cards, like an American flag. So it's like the islands, where the stars are, and then your mountains and plains are where the red and white stripes are. So, and it looks pretty cool. It's actually hanging up in our local shop right now.
Well, when I go in to pick up my my Commander decks, I'll have to check that out. So before we get into the set review, there's something I quick wanted to ask you guys about to see if you've noticed this. So everyone talks about power creep in Commander, and I posted about this on Twitter earlier, but I thought I'd mention it here because not everyone pays attention to Twitter. Obviously, like Questing Beast is a great card compared to like what we would have gotten a couple of years ago. But the thing I have kind of really noticed is it's not that the mythics aren't great, but they've kind of cleaned up the kind of throwaway cards, and there's just a lot of good cards in every set. It's not even so much that the cards are stronger, although they definitely are, but we've gone from this situation where sets would have a handful of good cards to 50 good cards, and when you're looking at that many good cards, a lot of them are going to fit your deck. So for example, I think back to, like 5-6 years ago when those core sets were hitting. So like we're talking like 2014, 2015, before Origins came out, when it was kind of the plain old core sets. And I remember spoilers dropping for those sets and like checking my phone and seeing what the new ones are today. And like at the end of the week, I'd check and see, okay, what cards do I want? And there'd be like 2 of the whole set, like a couple cards, 2 or 3 cards for all of my decks combined. it's relatively easy to make cuts then when you're like, okay, this card is decent, this card's decent, whatever. Nowadays, I look at the list of new cards that come out for a set, and there's like 3 or 4 cards per deck that I have that I think are good enough either to run or at the very least to try out. Making cuts is so much harder now than it was even 5 years ago.
I still use a pair of scissors. That's really
easy. I guess. like one of the examples that jumped out at me was I have a Sphinx tribal deck, and we just got that. One of the cards we'll talk about probably next week because we're just doing Legends this week is Dazzling Sphinx, which has an ability like when you hit somebody with it, you can reveal cards in the library and you can play one off the top. So it's just a free card when you deal combat damage. It's not anything amazing, but like that's pretty useful. Compare that to 5 years ago in that Sphinx tribal deck when I first built it. I was running things like Sarah Sphinx, which is the equivalent of Sarah Angel for a Sphinx. Not that it's a terrible card, but like it's just a semi-vanilla flyer with vigilance. So like a new card comes out, you're like, oh, I'll just pull out that Sarah Sphinx, or I'll pull out Argent Sphinx, which is kind of boring, or whatever. Nowadays, I get that new Dazzling Sphinx, and I'm like, okay, do I pull Dream Trawler? Every single card, even if it isn't a mythic, is a really good creature or something. We talked about a little bit a couple of the new white-black removal spells, like Fracture. Okay, Fracture's a really good card, but Mortify already exists, and so does Utter End and Vindicate and Anguish Unmaking and Generous Gift and A Hero's Downfall, and like all of which are relatively new cards too. So it's just gotten super hard, I think. There's so many good cards that come out. Making cuts is really, really challenging. Is that something you guys have kind of experienced, like as the last 4 or 5 years have passed, the amount of cards that you're always considering has gone up?
I would definitely say yes, but then I get into the mindset of, you know what? No, we're not going to do any of this. I like the deck the way it is. This is too much.
No, for sure. My version of that this time was, okay, I'm going to be super lazy and just pull tutors because like they're kind of boring anyway, you know, and it's easy to put back in later on. Like it's not going to fundamentally mess with the deck. So I'll pull out 3 different tutors in decks. Not that I'm running that many, but like I have, I still had like 1 demonic in one deck, 1 enlightened in one deck, whatever. Like I'm just going to pull tutors. That way I don't got to think about it. How about you, Max? Is that something you kind of ran into too at all?
Yeah, I definitely think the amount of good cards, whether they're the commons, uncommons, or the rares, have gone up exponentially over the years. And I think where I've struggled are in my very thematic decks. So I remember when we returned to Theros Beyond Death, and having my Tuvasa deck, that was like pulling hairs trying to find the cards from Theros that I wanted to put in and try. And then what do I pull out because these cards are all so on theme and they do so much in that deck. It's like, this card has been good, but this one, just the text alone is better, but is it going to perform better? The anxiety of performance in a piece of cardboard gets to you after time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And I think in some situations I've just gone to like, what would be more fun to play against? And I think a great example of that is when I pulled Angel of Jubilation out of my Dromoka deck, because that was kind of stacksy. I started noticing it shutting down other players' fetch lands or their entire deck sometimes just because of one creature in my 99. Yeah, that's
what it's supposed to do. It's just one.
True.
It's not like it's an actual, like stacks deck. It's like, oh, my once in every 12 games I pulled this one card. I guess you guys just got to live with it.
Exactly. But swapping that for Redain, who again is somewhat of a stacks card because it brings snowlands in tapped, and then non-creature spells cost 4 or more, cost 2 more to cast for my opponents. I have not seen those abilities affect the table as much as Angel Jubilation did. And that's what I made the swap for. So that's kind of where I've gone with the nitty-gritty cuts is what's going to be more fun to play against.
Sure, I can see that. Yeah, it's definitely much trickier. So I'll be curious to see if our listeners have experienced that at all too and what their thoughts are when it comes to making these cuts, because it's getting lean. And that's before we even factor in the fact that we're getting, 10 sets a year versus, 4 or 5 back then too. It's just not only are there more cards in the sets that are good, there's just so many more sets. It's just a lot to keep up with for sure. So, speaking of keeping up with things, should we jump into the legends here?
Let's do it.
So we're just going to go through the 4 new legendary creatures in each of the schools, and we'll just go by the order they were revealed, because each one was shown over the course of a full day, over the course of a week. So we'll start with Silverquill, and the first creature here is Brina the Demagogue, 1 and Orzhov, 3 mana for a bird warlock of all things. Brina's a 1/3 with flying, and whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So it's kind of a fixed Edric in that it doesn't matter how many creatures you attack with, you're only going to get that one card. It also shuts off in a 1v1 situation because it's only when someone attacks an opponent that has more life. So like if you're playing against, if it comes down to just you and somebody else, it's just going to be a 1/3 flyer, which is kind of unfortunate. What are your thoughts on this? Does anyone like this particularly well or have a home for it or anything?
It's going in my Alesha deck. Prepare yourselves.
Sure, because in this case, put those counters on Alesha or something else, and it's not going to affect something come back from the graveyard either because it's a 1/3.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. And discourages attacks too, or at least encourages people to swing elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's got evasion. I mean, it lets me net a card too when I attack, the opponent with the most life and stuff like that. So
I saw people talking about this for like their Queen Marchesa deck that does political stuff. It might make sense there. Do you like it, Max?
I did up until I realized that entire clause is one clause. Because, if it wasn't a full clause, like one continuous clause to be like, cool, it's down to 1v1, I'm going to attack my opponent. They're not going to draw a card, but my thing's going to get bigger, but that's not true. So, No, I don't like this card at all.
I mean, I think it's interesting. There is, the putting counters on something else is kind of useful. Like if you're running if you have persist stuff that gets -1 counters on it, you can kind of void them out with that ability and then, sack it to your whatever it is and have it bounce back and then void them out next turn when something attacks. Seems like a lot of messing around, but like you could do that. It's an interesting design, but it's something we've never seen in Orzhov before, so I'll give it credit for that. It's a weird design for those colors. Max, what's the next one we have here?
The next one we have Felisa, Fang of Silverquill.
Bye, Felisa.
Bye, Felisa. I thought we were going to just not do that, but okay. 2 in Orzhov for a 3/2 legendary creature vampire wizard. It has flying, Mentor, which for those who don't remember from War of the Spark, it might have been War, it might have been Guilds of Ravnica, one of those newer Ravnica sets. Whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with lesser power. And then it also says, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, create X tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of counters it had on it. I like this card. This is right up my alley for what I want to do. Put a bunch of cheap bodies on the floor, put counters on them. Doesn't have to be +1/+1 counters. It could be those ability counters from Ikoria.
Right.
Sack them away, make a bunch of flying tokens that are 2/1s.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. The thing is, this is like it almost seems like a weird ability base because most black-white decks don't really deal with counters per se. So it kind of falls in a different color base.
Yeah, it's also kind of a unique thing to see in these colors for sure. I think it's pretty good in decks if you're playing like Elenda the Dusk Rose or something where, you're putting counters on Elenda and then sacrificing her to make a ton of tokens and then replaying her or something. This is just extra value off your Elenda sacrifices anyway. And if you're playing Felisa, Elenda's really good in the deck. Any of those like X creatures where they come into play with counters on them, there's quite a few good ones that are colorless even.
True.
The Hangerback Walker or Stonecoil Serpent or Ugin's Conjurant come to mind. It's just extra gas in here. The Ozolith, so you sacrifice that creature somehow and put all the tokens into play, then move those counters onto the Ozolith and then, move to combat and move the counters back onto something and you can just do it again. Every turn. So the Ozolith's going to be around being really good in decks, I think, forever, basically. Particularly at 1 mana. That card's so good. But yeah, this one's neat. And this is the kind of thing that, like, if I didn't already have a black-white deck, I'd probably be looking at much closer. Is it good enough for Ragnar Krav, Max?
Maybe.
Okay.
There are a lot of lower powered non-token creatures in that deck, so the Mentor might have some play in here, and the fact that Felisa has flying makes it worthwhile to try.
Okay.
I see this in vampires. This is where I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, Edgar Markov puts counters on stuff too, so there's a lot of extra synergy there for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, what's next?
We have Fein the Broker. This is a legendary creature human warlock. We got more warlocks just coming out of the woodwork. For 2 colorless and a black, you get a 3/3. Now, Fein has 4 abilities. Wow, 4 abilities. I thought it was 3 there for a minute. First one is tap. Sack a creature. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Second one is tap, remove a counter from a creature you control, create a treasure token. Third one is tap, sacrifice an artifact, create a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying. And the last one is 3 colorless and a black, untap Fein the Broker. So then you can do it more times. Black's got all your Cabal coffers and all that fun stuff. So you get multitudes of mana to just do this repeatedly. So I actually had a person tell me about this card, and they're going to put it in their Corvold deck. Is where they're going to put this at. I don't know what kind of synergies it's going to have, really, like what kind of combo base, but I know it's going to be good because Corvold's all about sacrificing permanents to draw cards and put counters on. And the first one I see right away is, how about we play Corvold, sacrifice a permanent, put a counter on him. Let's remove the counter with him to create a treasure token. Let's sack the treasure token for mana, put another counter on Corvold, draw a card. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of synergies right there with it.
Yeah, I feel like as its standalone commander, I mean, not that you couldn't make it work, because you definitely could, but it definitely feels like the kind of card that works much better in the 99 of something like Corvold, where like all those abilities matter in some way. Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. This is the kind of thing that's going to pop up in a bunch of decks, I would guess, particularly with 4 abilities that are all useful.
Yeah, I mean, I see this in like Corvold itself. I think I could probably make an infinite combo out of this. I mean, it'd be close. It'd be pretty close. I'd have to look at all the other cards there, but I probably could figure something out.
Yeah, it's one of those things with 4 abilities, including one of a way to untap it. There's always something. Even if you don't see it right away, there's always something.
Yep.
The last legend from the Silverquill deck is Nils, Discipline Enforcer, 2 and a white for a human cleric, not a warlock this time. Nils is a 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls, and each creature with 1 or more counters on it can attack you or planeswalkers you control, unless the controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. So it's going to do like a Ghostly Prison propaganda style effect where, yes, people's stuff gets +1 counters on it, but it's going to be really expensive to attack you. And you're kind of encouraging everyone to swing at each other as well. So there's kind of a goad thing going on here a little bit. And I guess if you're playing a goad deck with access to white, you'd probably want to run this as well. And like with Felisa that Max talked about before, where it cares about the number of counters on a creature, not +1 counters, the same thing is true here. Like, yes, you're putting +1 counters on creatures, but it just says each creature with 1 or more counters on it can attack you or a planeswalker you control. So if it has those counters from Ikoria on it, or even a -1/-1 counter, those just aren't going to be able to attack you. I believe if Gideon is turned into a creature using one of those Gideon abilities, he's now a creature with loyalty counters on him, and that Gideon can't attack you either.
Correct.
I don't know what you would build. Like, I feel like a mono white deck where your commander just makes it tough to attack you probably doesn't sound like the best deck in the world. But I think if you are playing a deck that does do something else and you also want to have pillow fort kind of effects, this is pretty solid.
I would still attack you. Every turn I would just turn on you and be like, nope, we need to stop this right now.
No, but that's a good point, because like if you don't deal with it, then all your opponent's creatures are going to get more and more buff and less likely to attack the person who has Nils out, and more likely to attack you as well. So like you do have to kind of deal with it.
Yeah.
See, I love this card because it doesn't care about the counter that you put on the creature. It just cares about the creature having counters on it. So I just think about like running up against maybe like your Crush deck, Dana.
Yeah.
This shuts that down outside of all the fling effects you have. But like,
you are just going to accidentally sometimes blank someone's deck. You're just sit on them, like if you're playing Nils and drop it and they're like, oh, I'm playing a +1 counters deck and I just can't attack.
Exactly. Yeah, I think for how this is a super cheaply costed card at 3 mana for a very powerful effect, I think this is an awesome mono white legendary to either lead a deck or be in the 99 of any type of deck you want to build.
And, it doesn't interact with planeswalkers like Zero, who goes and fetches them, but like I was thinking about putting it in that Zero deck just to make it more difficult to get in on me when you want to swing. So I had to consider that as part of the deck. I haven't found a home yet for it, but it's one I'm eyeballing. So
it wouldn't be a bad idea
card
at all.
Yeah. All right, Max, you want to take us into Quandrix here?
Sure. So the first card in the Quandrix deck we're going to talk about is Adrix and Nev, Twin Casters. It's 2 and Simic for a 2/2 legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. It has Ward 2, and Ward is a new keyword that says whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 2. So a easier version of Hexproof. It makes things... You can still target the creature, you just gotta have more mana for it. It also has a second ability that says if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many many of those tokens are created instead. So that's cool. That's a parallel lives on a creature that hits any token. So your treasure tokens, your food tokens, your gold tokens, clue tokens, along with all the creature tokens you're probably going to be making in your Simic deck. This is just awesome. I think the fact that it has ward, it has a little bit of baked in protection, even though it doesn't have any type of evasion, is a really cool commander and doesn't seem that broken, but it probably is more broken than it seems.
Yeah, the fact that it's doubling the amount of whatever tokens you're making is really, really useful. It's not just reliant on creature tokens as well. So there's a little bit of extra gas there. And, there's a lot of decks already that are token decks that are in those colors, and it probably makes a really good addition just to that deck in general, especially because of that ward keyword that keeps it a little bit safe. How about you, Chris? You have any thoughts on this one?
It's green-blue that deals with tokens. I mean... Let's do something new here, Wizards. Come on.
It doesn't say draw a card. Come on, let's give them some credit.
They did a pretty good job visually making all of these schools look different than their Ravnica Guild counterparts.
True.
Some of them they did so mechanically as well. Simic and Quandrix feel pretty close to each other mechanically for sure. So yeah, if this was a card from a Ravnica set, I don't think anyone would have batted an eye.
Oh boy.
So Chris, what's our next legend here?
The next legend we have is Essex. Fractal Bloom, right? Okay, I said that right. Wow. Yeah. New cards, I hate them. Can't read, we gotta love it. So for 4 colorless and green and blue, we get a legendary creature that's a fractal. It is a 4/4 with flying. And it reads, the first time you would create 1 or more tokens during each of your turns, you may instead choose a creature other than Essex Fractal Bloom and create that many tokens that are copies of that creature. What is going on with this card? I have to reread that like 3 times now. I thought I read it right the first time when I was reading the notes.
So essentially, if you were to create tokens of something, if you were to create tokens, those tokens can instead be token copies of a creature you control. I think that's correct.
Yes. So like if you cast, I'm trying to think of a token spell in these colors.
When you sacrifice your Hanger Backwalker with 5 counters on it, instead of making 5 Thopters, you're going to make 5 Wormcoil Engines, if that's out, or whatever else you have, or 5 Avengers Zendikars, and then you make all those tokens.
Yeah, I'm going to cast Avengers Zendikar, which is going to bring in, 10 plant tokens, which are all going to come in as Avengers Zendikars, each making 10 plant tokens themselves. So it won't go infinitely because it only it's only the one time that any amount of tokens come into play, but it will turn those 10 plants into 10 Avengers, which will each make 10, so it'll make you 100 plants, and that's pretty sweet. And I feel like that's what everyone's going to be shooting for. Everyone is going to want to get Avenger out with Essex.
Ugh. I mean, there's multiple ways you could do it, just even the first time, so having Essex out in general, the first time, if you're doing any type of token theme, you can just trigger this and do all sorts of wild, wacky shenanigans with it.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of goofy stuff happening with this commander for sure.
I don't know why, but I really want an altar of this as the fart cloud from Rick and Morty that Morty rescues when he's actually trying to be killed by the assassin.
There you go, Ryan Penniff. Get to work. All right, the first of the 2 mono commanders we got here, we have Deca, Fractal Theorist for 4 and blue for a human wizard. She's 3/3 and has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token and put X +1 counters on it, where X is that spell's mana value. You can also spend 3 and a blue and give target creature token unblockable until end of turn, but the main value here is kind of that Talrand ability, although in this case it actually triggers off copies as well, not just the cast. Or I guess the what's the shark? NATO.
Shark Typhoon?
There we go. Sharknado, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
I think everybody did.
That one doesn't put counters on it, just makes X tokens, but kind of a similar effect. So, this thing exists in blue for the most part. Like I said, Talrand is a card that's been around forever. I have a Talrand deck. This is just another variant on that. It makes a little bit different creatures in that they don't have flying, but they can get much larger than the ones Talrand makes. You also have a little bit extra synergy with +1 counter stuff here. Deep Glow Skate in mono blue is going to give you double counters on things, so that's pretty good. The Ozolith, again, is going to be something in this deck that's really, really strong. Talrand's really good in this deck. If you are playing Talrand, this probably is pretty good in your Talrand deck. So nothing really new here, but I do think it's kind of a fun twist.
We're lucky that tokens don't have color identities for Commander, or else this wouldn't
Sure.
work in a lot of Talrand decks.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, because it making the green and blue fractals.
Do you think this is going to go in your Talrand deck, Dana?
I haven't decided. 5 mana is a good amount. Maybe. I don't have Shark Typhoon in there right now. But maybe. But part of the reason I didn't put Shark Typhoon in there either was because it like immediately was like $15, and I was just like, I'll just deal with it when it's 5 if it ever drops again. So
the upside to that, Dana, is they reprinted Shark Typhoon in one of the Challenger decks, I do believe, that just came
I believe so, yeah. So the price has fallen on it a little bit. So this is a maybe, Max. I've got it on my list, but I have not found a home for it yet. It was one of the ones that I'm like, I don't know what to make cuts for. So we will see.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. My only argument against it, and I guess in comparison to Shark Typhoon at 1 more mana, the sharks fly, these don't.
Yes. And particularly in that deck where I have things like favorable winds or gravitational shift that care about flying, that is a big deal, yeah.
And Shark Typhoon also has cycling on it too, so
Yep.
worst case scenario, you can cycle it.
Yep, it just makes something then.
Yep.
All right, what's next on the list?
The
Max.
next one from Quandrix is Raphael Garcia, Patient Professor. I'm sorry. Ruxa, Patient Professor. It's a 4/4 for 4/2 green for a legendary creature, Bear Druid. Whenever Ruxa, Patient Professor enters the battlefield or attacks, return target creature card with no abilities from your graveyard to your hand. Creatures you control with no abilities get +1/+1, and the icing on the cake is you may have creatures you control with no abilities assign their combat damage as though they weren't blocked. That is the bear of all bears, I think, right there for anybody out there that wants to play, their no ability vanilla creatures in green.
The Baragonda petroglyphs of commanders.
Yeah, it's perfect for what it needs to do.
And I didn't even think of this till I listened to the Commander Social episode where they mentioned that Ruxa for a bear is a Teddy Ruxpin play on the old toy bear, which I hadn't even noticed before. So yeah, I mean, it's a real specific deck. I don't know if it has a home outside of, and unless you really are playing a dedicated bear tribal deck, I think it's going to be the commander of a very particular deck, and that's about it. But I love when they put these kind of goofy cards in Commander. This is what Commander is all about for me, and even if it's not my thing or I'm not going to play it, it's a super cool card.
I do like this card a lot, just for the simple fact that a lot of your draft chaff that has, like green creatures that have no abilities really become playable now.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. The funny build your Crawworm deck that we've always wanted.
Rah, rah, rah.
All right, Chris, take us to Prismari.
So the first one for this wonderful Prismari deck is Zephi. Probably just butchered the name. It's a Thunder Conductor is what it is. For 2 colorless, blue and red, you get a legendary creature human shaman that is a 1/4. It has Magecraft, which reads, whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, scry 1. If that spell's converted mana cost is 5 or greater, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. If that spell's converted mana cost is 10 or greater, the Thunder Collector deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. Oh, hey, do you guys realize this? So, I'm just reading this right now, but so the name on the card says Thunder Conductor. The name in the text says Thunder Collector.
Yes, indeed. They messed that up.
I was wondering if I was the only one who just noticed that.
I believe there were a few of them from this set.
There's a couple other mistakes like that, yeah.
That's from what I heard. That is why print has been backlogged. And why it's like redoing right now is because there's been a lot of misprints and stuff on this set.
Well, this is probably all stuff that was being edited about a year ago when everyone's like quick trying to work from home and throwing everything off. So that does make sense. I guess I get it. It seems like an easy thing to catch, but mistakes happen, and there was a lot of chaos going on a year ago. So I'm understanding of how that happened.
I'm gonna have to hunt down these misprints. That's what I'm gonna have to do.
But yeah, so you if you cast a 10 mana instant or sorcery, because you get all 3 then it stacks, then you scry and you create a 4/4 blue elemental, red and blue elemental, and you do 10 damage to somebody. So this feels a little bit like a fixed Mizzix of the Niv Magus, I guess.
Yeah, to a point.
Yeah, you cast Fireball and hit somebody for 10, and then it's going to hit somebody else for 10.
Any of those, I don't remember what set they were from. They were like the finales, I think they were, where if you cast them for 10 or greater, whatever, they had a different ability too, so you just trigger another ability on top of that. So
yeah, like at the very base level, if you jam the deck with 15 mana rocks and a ton of blue X draw spells and a ton of red X draw spells and ways to protect your commander. Just get Defy out and ramp and then start throwing X equals 10 draw spells or at yourself, or X equals 10 fireballs or disintegrates or whatever at other people, and it probably can win you games.
I'm not sure about that. Red and blue is not a good color combination to do that in, but okay.
It is with Mythics
play some
out.
control.
I do see why they changed the word to mana value instead of converted mana cost, because if it was still converted mana cost, this text would look like a card from Antiquities, I think, with all that text on it.
There's a lot of these cards in here that have a lot of words on the page. The next one we have here is a Zayran, Voice of Duality for 3 mana, 1 and a blue and a red for a free to wizard. That's a 2/2. Also has Magecraft. In this case, the trigger is whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Zayran, Voice of Duality gets +1/+1 till end of turn. So it's kind of like a variant on prowess. If you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell and it causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers a second time. So since Veyran has that Magecraft ability that triggers when you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, that alone is going to trigger twice. So whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, Veyran's going to get +2/+2 every single time for every one that you cast. So, this is kind of a way to have maybe kind of a super prowess. You could definitely build this as a prowess commander or just any kind of a spell slinger deck, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if this is your commander, it's one of those things where you probably would run Talrand or Deca that we talked about before in the deck. Yep. Since you're casting so many spells, make a bunch of tokens on top of it. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about it for my Kedison Crown deck, but I'm not sure I will run it there. But it's a cool card. Either of you guys have any thoughts on it?
All I got to say is I usually harp on you wizards, because you guys can't, do anything I ever want to have happen, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart for not making this card modern legal, because I would probably quit the format right then and there.
You think that this would be a lot to deal with in modern? Yeah, I can see that.
Because there's a deck running around that's like Sprite Dragon, Monastery Swift Spear, all that stuff, and so this card to go right in it and then trigger those prowesses twice for casting one lightning bolt in my face. No. That would be dumb.
It would be a lot. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of Swift Spear, but yeah, that would be really, really tough to deal with in modern. I wonder if it's because there's almost always a legacy version of those kind of decks too, but I'm wondering if it's too much mana to do a thing in that style deck.
I don't know, man. You get whatever those stupid 0 mana artifacts are that you can sack for whatever color. I mean, that triggers prowess and stuff like that too, so it might be a thing to do.
All right, what is the next one we have here, Max?
The next one is Octavia, Living Thesis. It's 8 blue for an 8/8 legendary creature elemental octopus. It says this spell costs 8 less to cast if you have 8 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard. It has ward 8, so if something's going to target it from your opponents, it costs 8 more. And it also has targeted. And it also has Magecraft. Because why not? Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, target creature has base power and toughness 8/8 until end of turn. This is, that's a lot of words on a card for a 10 mana, or hopefully a 2 mana 8/8. That's what I would want to do with this, is just do that once, cast it for 2 blue mana, and call it a day.
This card, it draws me in, but then it pushes me off too, because it's just, there's so much to it. It's good for what it is, but the clause to get it down to only 2 mana is with all the graveyard hate that runs around the game and stuff like that, it might be hard to do. I'm not quite sure about this card.
Yeah, I think it's much better in a deck. I think it will be tough to play as your commander. I'm still torn on whether I would want it in Talrand as well. There's those perfect scenarios where you get it out for, like you said, 2 mana, and then you just start turning Drakes into 8/8s whenever I, cast a Brainstorm or a Ponder or something. But there's also times you're going to draw it after a board wipe or after someone's already hit Scavenger Grounds or something, and you're like, I can't pay 10 for this.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you do. You just jam it in there for 10 because, Ward 8 plus the CMC of the spell that's
functionally
targeting
hexproof.
Yeah.
So
I do like that you need 8 or more. It's not, it costs less for every instant or sorcery in your graveyard. So that makes
it read that. It should read just that's what it should.
But I wish it had to say, I wish it had the condition of Nezahal, where discard some cards to protect it versus the ward of 8.
Oh yeah, that would make it a lot easier to hit those numbers every time you recast it as well if it was your commander.
I think they just like the number 8 on this card. That's what's
clearly a theme they were going with here. Yeah. All right, Chris, I think you're up next.
All right, the next one we have is Rionia, Fire Dancer. 3 colorless and double red for a human wizard that is a 3/4. Rionia reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create X tokens that are copies of another target creature you control, where X is 1 plus the number of instant or sorcery spells you've cast this turn. They gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. Wizards, casting spells, mono red. Yeah, this, honestly, I think in a mono red deck, this card would not play off the way that you want it to. It's definitely got to go into a multicolored deck of some sort, just so you get the more instants of sorceries, because red's more, in my opinion, the better cards in red are creature base over the spell base. But that's just personally me.
I think red does have some good spells, but I think this is, it's just kind of a different variation on Felden that does a very similar thing. And I think it's a fun card. I think you're going to see people do things like we kind of talked about with copying Avenger before, where people are going to be copying creatures that have really good enter the battlefield abilities.
Yeah.
So, you run a bunch of efficient instants or sorceries and then make a copy of, I'm not even thinking of Emrakul's Hatcher pops into my head for whatever reason. There was an Eldrazi that makes 3 Eldrazi tokens when it comes into play. So it's like those kind of a thing. There's a couple of different goblins that do that. Goblin War Marshal or whatever, like those kind of things, or ETB destroyed artifact kind of stuff. So there's a lot of play you can do here, but it's nothing that's that new, but it's a good card.
It is a good card.
I want to build dragons with this deck, because if you get something like an Utvar Hellkite out,
oh gross, yeah, no, that's a good call.
You make a copy of it, 2 copies of it, those copies have haste. Now you just made 4 more dragons. You keep the tokens that are essentially Utvar Hellkites. And then, you just keep the base 6/6s, but you still keep the original Utvar. Like, there are so many cool things that are like single copying an Atali and then getting an attack trigger off that token or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess that wouldn't work because Atali's legendary, but you get what I mean. There's a lot of cool cards in red that have attack triggers that these tokens will gain as well.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we will move over to Lorehold here. And we have Alaboo, Ancient Witness, legendary artifact creature Golem, who's a 4/5. Other artifact creatures you control have haste. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alaboo, Ancient Witness deals X damage to any target, and you scry X, where X is the number of tapped artifacts you control. That seems really strong.
Boros is coming back with a vengeance, boys.
Well, it's not artifact creatures or anything. It's artifacts. Like, it's, if you have ways to tap artifacts, whether it's like swords or whatever, your artifact lands count. Your mana rocks will all count. Like, you can do a lot of damage to people really, really quickly with this commander.
Mm-hmm. Good thing it says other artifact creatures as well. It doesn't say that they have haste, because that would be that would be horrible.
Yeah.
This is probably, I'm going to say it right now, out of all the decks, this is my favorite one. Looking at all of them, and probably one of the only ones I'm going to buy out of all of them.
It feels the strongest. Both the commanders, the one we'll talk about next, is real solid too. Yeah, and this is, I think, the best deck, definitely, which is something who thought we'd ever say about about a white-red deck, but here we are.
Yeah, Boros. And now I can build a Boros deck and not feel like I'm, a horrible player or something. Is
this enough to make you build a Boros deck again, Max?
No.
He's never going to build Boros again. And if he does, I'm not going to play with him when he plays.
He's been burned too many times.
And only because of what both of you just said. Boros or Lorehold is kind of coming back strong. Everybody is excited about it, so I'm avoiding it because everybody else is jumping on that train right now.
Sure.
Ask me in 2 years, I might bust out an Alaboo Peekaboo deck or something like that. Run a bunch of sneak attack effects with artifact creatures. That'd be cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So you have thought about this, Max, have you not?
I plead the 5th.
Well, since you're pleading the 5th, what's the next commander we talking about here, Max?
Next commander is Ozgear the Reconstructor. 2 red and a white for a 4/4 legendary creature, giant artificer. It has vigilance and a couple activated abilities. The first one is a generic mana and sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And then the second ability is X generic mana and tap, exile an artifact card with mana value X or X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card. Activate only as a sorcery.
Oof, there is a lot going on there.
This dude looks straight out of like World of Warcraft or League of Legends or some like MMO game. I love the art style on this card.
And he has Vigilance, so he can swing in at somebody as a 4 body and then still be able to use his ability in the second main phase. And even if like all you're doing is, sacrificing an artifact to make another copy of, one of the Sword of Fire and Ice or something, and then you're going to get 2 of them to equip to something even if you're not using this as your commander, if you are playing some kind of a Boros equipment deck, which is a pretty common theme, this is still pretty good in that deck too.
I just keep thinking of like a Wormcoil engine and sacking.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
To give him +2/+2, and then you get the 2 tokens, and then you exile Wormcoil engine and create 2 more Wormcoil and.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here.
See, that's the part I think is what's going to trip people up, is the fact that you have to exile the thing you're going to make copies of. So, do you want to, I totally understand, tapping your Soul Ring, sacrificing it, using one of the mana to sacrifice it, give something +2/+0. Then pay 1, use that remaining mana, exile that Soul Ring to make 2 more Soul Rings. I totally get that. I don't know how much you want to really go into exiling your big beaters like a Wormcoil engine or, your mere Battlesphere just to get 2 copies of it when you don't have the original left. Once those tokens are gone, they're gone. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how people use this, whether it's to reuse mana rocks or utility artifacts versus artifact creatures.
Just play 4-color and then get those other cards that, make extra tokens and stuff.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, if you've got this in a deck somehow that has access to doubling season.
I'm just going to name the deck tokens. That's what it is.
Chris, what's our first monocolor commander here?
The first monocolor one is Layla. That's how I'm going to pronounce this, Layla. It's probably horribly wrong. I'm going to get yelled at again, like I usually do after these sets. The Blade Reforged. For 2 colors and a red, you get a 2/2 legendary creature that's a spirit warrior. Layla has haste and reads, whenever Layla the Blade Reforged attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever you exile 1 or more cards from your library and or graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Layla. So, when she attacks, you immediately exile, so then she gets a +1/+1 counter, so then she becomes a 3/3, and then you can cast that. This seems real good.
Well, and she just gets the counter 2 from the exile. So even if you wind up not using the card, it doesn't care.
Yep.
So it's card advantage baked into her. She gets stronger, and it synergizes with all of the red kind of outpost siege effects where you have the ability to use the cards from exile. We don't even have to use them; just have to get them in exile.
That is true.
So, and it's also like it interface if you have other things that exile cards from your library or graveyard, because it is and or graveyard. So there's plenty of kind of Scrabbling Claws kind of effects where you can exile cards from graveyards. Just start exiling cards from your graveyard and yourself that you've already used up and put some counters on her.
Yeah, I mean, you got like Relic of Progenitus where you can just tap it every turn for 1 mana and just exile a card in general.
Yeah.
Play it in a red-green deck. You can use Scavenging Ooze to eat a creature, make Scavenging Ooze bigger, gain life. I mean, all that fun stuff, plus trigger the
Seems real solid.
See, this is why people should play Graveyard Hate, so none of this shenanigans happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, this, I'm super interested in this. I kind of want to build this as like a Voltron-esque build with all those outpost siege effects, or even like Bag of Holdings and some token support with the Desecrated Tomb. Is that the one where a card leaves your graveyard, you make the bat token? So stuff like that could all really play well into this deck.
Pixis of Pandemonium.
Yeah, this is one I expect to see people build the mono red deck around, because it's a solid card. Everything is all kind of in one package. It's not busted, but it's going to be effective.
Yep.
All right, the mono white commander in the set, we have Lashiel Clockwork Scholar for 2 and a white for an Elephant Artificer. Prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to attacking artifact creatures you control, and whenever 1 or more artifact creatures enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card, and this ability triggers only once each turn. So as your commander in mono white, it does have card advantage on artifacts entering the battlefield under your control, artifact creatures I should say. I don't know if there's enough stuff to want to build a mono white artifact creature deck, but if you are playing some kind of deck with access to white that's doing artifact creature shenanigans, it's a really, really good card.
Yeah, I mean, I can see this going in a Brea deck or other stuff like that as well, just for the single ability draw a card plus protect your artifact creatures. So I
wish you could draw more than 1 card.
Yes.
Solely looking at this in the vacuum of mono white. I get why it's not in even 2 colors or more, but if this was solely like a mono white commander, I just look at something like SRAM, and that has no cap on how many cards you can draw off of it.
Right.
Where artifacts cost mana, more than these cheap auras that SRAM probably runs. I wish it just was more cards.
I would guess the problem there is there's not many ways, because it's an ETB and not a cast trigger, there's not a lot of things that put multiple enchantments into play per turn, whereas this, like talking about sacrificing Hangerback Walker or the Mere Battlesphere or something, drawing 5 cards off of Mere Battlesphere or drawing 10 off your Hangerback that had 10 counters on it seems crazy, but I don't know, I guess Simic does that kind of thing all the time.
Exactly.
They like to keep white in check, but
it also makes you make that decision. Do I sack my Hangerback Walker to make 3 Thopters and draw a card, or do I spend all my mana and play this one bigger artifact creature that could easily be removed?
All right, Max. Last school here. Witherbloom, what do we have?
Giome, Master Chef. I'm going to join Chris's camp in knowing that I screwed that name up. It's a legendary creature, Troll Warlock, for 2 black and a green. It's a 5/3. Has trample, and then at the beginning of your end step, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of non-token creatures you had enter the battlefield under your control this turn. And then it has an activated ability for 1 generic mana. Sacrifice a food token. Target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. It's cool that food tokens are finally being kind of used outside of standard, I guess.
Yeah.
This deck is going to be the new everybody sitting in a chair deck, I think. Like, it's just going to be
Sure.
the cooking deck. The deck revolves around food. That's just my opinion. I'm sure someone's going to make something super broken out of it because it is a 5/3 body, but it's a cool design. I like it.
I like it a lot as well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's got some flavor for every student that shows up. He makes
no
food
pun
for them.
intended.
Yep, right. Cauldron Familiar is a really good card in standard, and this interacts pretty nicely with that. You can probably do some like Mirror Retriever, Scrap Trawler kind of loops, bringing them back and forth, making food tokens each time to make a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
It's cool to see kind of a meme card actually be good too. So it's fun.
I like the ability of the simple fact that it has the activated part where you have protection of some sort, or you can turn it the other way around to tap down a massive creature to come swinging through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's super cool. I didn't think about it as an offensive maneuver.
All right, Chris, what's our second gold card here in Witherbloom?
The next card that we have is Willow Dusk, Essence Seer. For 1 colorless, black and a green, you get a Dryad Druid. I thought all Dryads were Druids to begin with, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Whatever. For a 3/3. For 1 generic and tap, you have choose another target creature, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of life you gain this turn, or the amount of life you lost this turn, whichever is greater. Activate only as a sorcery. Dana, this seems really good for your playstyle, the way that you just like decide to go, no life, no life, no life, no life, no life.
Yeah, and the fact that it like triggers off of life gained or life lost too gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to build it.
It's interesting.
I wish this was one of those cards where it said activate only once per turn versus as a sorcery, because this could go really kind of combo-rific with, drain your life a bunch with like a Toxic Deluge, play this, somehow give it haste, attack with hatred, giving it so much more, and then activate it to put, 20 counters on it, depending on how much you put into hatred and Toxic Deluge, and just one-shot someone. But nope, we can only do it as a sorcery, so they're going to see it coming. They're
going to see it coming, and I think the kind of speed bump here in this card is going to be like, it's going to want you to have a bunch of things in your deck. You're going to want to have things like the Chris favorite Instill Energy that gives you an untap, which is that's fantastic in here. But people are going to be looking for multiple ways to untap, and then you need multiple ways to either lose or gain life, and then really good targets to put those +1 counters onto. And then this is the kind of thing where when you're putting 10 count, Doubling Season isn't that good when you're putting 1 counter on something. Not that it's bad, but Hardened Scales is much better when you're putting 1 counter on a thing. When you're putting 10 or 12 counters on something is when Doubling Season gets crazy broken. And so any of those, cards in the Golgari colors that would have access to the double counters are going to be really good here, and there's quite a few of them. So I think that the thing that holds this deck back from being too strong is the fact that you want to run 130 cards, and that's not how Commander works. So I think you're going to have to make hard choices, and that's probably what's going to keep the power level, pretty much in check, because there's just so many things you'd want to do to make this work perfectly.
I think this just fits in any Golgari deck, honestly. Just the simple fact that majority of blacks, like the good draw spells that are in black, you're going to lose life anyways. So, I mean, it's just inconsequential. You're just, I'm going to lose 2, draw 2, and now I'm going to put 2 counters on something. I mean, it's just that easy.
All right, we have up next the monocolor commander here, Eudora Grave Gardener, 4 and a green for a Truefolk Druid who's a 5/5. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. So that's a thing. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. If you have ways to bounce things that you can then replay, for one, this becomes a land, and there's plenty of stuff that in green, like Scrib Ranger, for example, that like will bounce lands back to your hand. You can like play your Secure Tribe Elder and sacrifice it to go get a land, and then it comes back into play as a land, and then you bounce it back to your hand, and then replay it again to sacrifice it, and it comes back. Like, there's a lot of, like, none of the loops, I don't think, with it are super crazy busted, but there's a ton of value just in the little kind of loops, and that's before you get into things that turn your lands into creatures. There's plenty of spells and enchantments that do that, and if you have a sack outlet to sacrifice the face down creature that's a land that's been turned back into a creature by like Living Plane or something, then you can sacrifice it and it will come back into play where you can sacrifice it again. Like, there's a lot of combo potential in this card, I think.
The way I see this card is this is another green protection spell of sorts, where if you get board wiped from anyone, it's just, okay, now I have a bunch of lands. And now I start jamming other spells. The other thing I see is this actually makes your mana dorks more valuable, because you can just start swinging willy-nilly with them. You can use them for mana in the beginning and then just swing willy-nilly because they're going to turn into a land anyway. So they're, serving their purpose as they originally were.
If not even better sometimes, like, or at least they're less fragile. That land where elf dies pretty easily. And you're down the mana. Then it bounces back as a forest land where it's much more difficult to remove.
Haha, Dryad Arbor is now a playable card, right? That's how this works.
There we go, yeah. Yeah, this will be a combo machine, but like you said, it's just a really good protection spell to save your board presence in a lot of decks as well. So worst case scenario is pretty good, and the ceiling is huge on it. And it's kind of kept in check a little bit by being mono green too. So, I mean, mono green's pretty good, but like, it would be that much stronger if you had access to other colors.
Yeah, and thank God it doesn't have like Trampler or Reach or something on it.
All right, last but not least, Max, who's the last commander we have?
We have Tavash, Gloom Summoner. It's 4 and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature, human warlock. It has lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, you may pay X life, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. If you do, create an XX black demon creature token with flying. I like this one a lot. I've always been intrigued with demons. I know a couple of our friends have demon tribal decks, and I think this is the commander to really make those decks feel complete.
Yeah, one thing that's nice here is because, sometimes commanders with good abilities come into play and you have to wait a full turn for it to do a thing. This triggers at the beginning of your end step. So as long as you had some way to gain life on your turn, when this comes into play, it's just going to start triggering at your end step immediately and make you that black demon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing I like about this too is a lot of the big life gain decks. There's the 2 mana guy who they always run, the black-white one or whatever.
Karlov.
They have all the, life gain in the world, but they never really have like the way to utilize that life aside from just padding themselves. Whereas now you have a way of utilizing that life to actually put a huge clock onto the field and take out the rest of the game.
Yeah, this is a really solid card, both in the 99. Like, if you're gonna play your Willow Dusk deck, or even something like Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, or Aloro, commanders that are built around doing life gain kind of shenanigans, it's great in those decks as well, and it's going to be a commander on top of that with its own mono black deck. So all of these 4, I think, in this deck in particular, are all really interesting as well.
I think that the art on this card looks sick too. Yeah, he's got this little goatee and white hair, and he's just like, "What's up?"
Gives me big like Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts vibes.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been a relatively, we went over an hour. Next week, we will come back and talk about the other cards in these decks, because there's a lot of good ones here, too. But as a wrap-up here, are you guys picking up any of these decks, or all of them? What's your plan for the Commander 2021 releases?
I should probably just buy them all. It's probably what I should do. I really want the red-white one more than anything. because the other ones are only like key cards that I saw out of them that I wanted, but I should probably just pick them up because, I screwed that one up when they printed the, what is it, the counter spell and the destroy card in the last set, and I'm like, oh, well, that was a mistake.
How about you, Max?
Seeing that there really isn't any of those, Force of... all those type of fun cards that we got last year.
The Fierce Guardianship.
Fierce Guardianship, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking Force of Negation. I'm like, no, that's Modern Horizons. There aren't those type of cards that I've seen yet in these decks, so like Chris, I should pick all of them up, but for sure I'm going to prioritize the blue-red one and the black-green one if I only get a few of them.
I definitely did. I pre-ordered all 6 from the store, or all 5 from the store last week from our local shop, and I'm gonna get them all. I think last year was the one year I didn't.
Oh, you screwed up
forever, and it would have been the year to do it because those free cast spells almost cost as much as the decks themselves. So this year I'm just gonna get them all again, and it's one of those things too. For the most part, if you buy a commander deck, you can resell that commander deck for what you paid for it. If you don't open it, if you want to open it, use it, fine. But you're never gonna lose money on these things.
Yeah.
Very often they go way up. But worst case, when you're spending $30 for a commander deck, you can just dump it for $30. Somebody will buy it. They're pretty easy to get rid of. So I'm just gonna pick them up, and if I'll crack the ones I want, and I'll buy out some other singles, and we'll go from there. But I'm very happy with all 5 of them, even if I think the Witherbloom and the Lorehold ones are probably the most interesting. They did a nice job. I'm happy with it. All right, we'll be back next week to talk about the non-legendary stuff from Commander 2021. I'm Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Ursa Bearwalker. You can find him as a mono green bear in one of the Commander 2021 decks. And you can also find him on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We'll be back next week. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.